Turkey's month-long military operation in Syria's Afrin is taking a new turn as pro-Damascus forces have begun entering the region. Syria, which regards Turkey's move as a violation of its sovereignty, deployed its forces to the area to support the local Kurds and clear the area of pockets of Daesh. Upon their arrival, Turkey's army targeted the positions of the Syrian government forces, risking further military escalation between the two countries. Syria's military deployment to Afrin seems to have placed the U.S.-backed Kurdish militants on the same side as pro-Damascus forces. This further complicates the situation in Syria's north, where the anti-Damascus U.S. forces are also present.
This is perhaps the most complicated area in the entire Syria conflict, because whereas it was very clear who was on whose side in much of the other regions, here we find that the YPG, who actually dominate this entire area, were formerly being backed by the United States in terms of the military support. They were part of the SDF, so the wider Syrian Defense Force, which was also largely backed by the US and outside agencies, and they dominated 25% of Syria. But in this instance, what's happened is that the Turks are clearly moving in, they say, to protect their interests, to create effectively a buffer zone which splits Kurds in Syria from the Kurdish movement in Turkey.
Meanwhile, Turkish President Rejeb Tayyib Erdogan has said that pro-Syrian government forces withdrew from the Afrin region after coming under fire. Separately, Turkey's top diplomat said his country's forces have no intention of suspending operations there, playing down the importance of Syria's military deployment to the region.
However, others are saying that actually it's really just Turkey creating a situation in which they can have more bargaining chips when and if the entire Syrian, if you like, decision-making for its territorial boundaries in the future is made. Nonetheless, in reality, the clash between Assad's forces, President Assad's forces, which have just recently begun to support the YPG, they've begun to enter Afrin. In fact, they were attacked by shell fire on their entry and have now apparently withdrawn 6 miles away from Afrin itself. But the bottom line is that we have now seen a clash between Syrian forces and the Turkish forces in that region. That is very likely to accelerate.
Turkey's operation in Syria, which began on January the 20th, has so far displaced an estimated 16,000 people. The offensive came shortly after the US announced plans for the creation of a 30,000-strong force, consisted of Kurdish militias in Syria's north. For much of Syria's conflict, the US and Turkey worked together, jointly supporting militants fighting against Damascus. But the US's mid-January announcement resulted in a period of heightened tensions between Ankara and Washington. Turkey's air and ground operation in Syria's north has been a matter of grave concern to the US and Russia that have military forces in the conflict-ridden country. During a phone conversation, Russian President Vladimir Putin discussed the operation in Afrin with his Turkish counterpart, President Erdogan. The two leaders also threw their weight behind collaborative Syria peace efforts involving Russia, Turkey and Iran. Separately, Iranian President Hassan Rouhani discussed recent developments in Syria's north with President Erdogan over the phone. They underlined the importance of cooperation in the fight against terrorist elements. With the defeat of Daesh terrorists in Syria late last year, there were growing hopes that the country's deadly crisis could come to an end. But Turkey's operation, amid continued US intervention, opened a new front in Syria's conflict, which has claimed the lives of hundreds of thousands and displaced millions more.